Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Charli XCX, How I'm Feeling Now. This was a project that I was looking forward to quite a bit because I'm a pretty big fan of Charli XCX, and not only that, but the concept of this record also intrigued me too, essentially being a record somewhat inspired by and themed after and created in the COVID-19 pandemic environment, quarantining and all of that, and I was interested to see if this project was going to be something a bit different from anything Charli had done before, or if it was going to be maybe a bit more of the same. And fortunately, after listening to this thing a good few times now, it's not only a project that manages to have its own distinct personality within Charli's discography, it's also just a really great album as a whole too. Since 2016, Charli's been experimenting with this form of kind of odd experimental pop music, something that I feel like is right in the middle between more accessible electropop music and kind of more experimental, weird forms of pop and electronic music, stuff like bubblegum bass, for example. I feel like she's right in the middle of those sounds, and she manages to get the best of both worlds in a sense, because she has that kind of experimental, off-kilter sound to her music, but at the same time, she manages to be really catchy and accessible at the same time in a way that I really enjoy from pop music. And this style of experimental pop is still basically what Charli is doing here on this new project, but she shows a new side of this sound on this album that I really enjoyed. A sound that's a bit more abrasive, a bit noisier, but at the same time, still accessible too. I wouldn't call the sound of this project lo-fi or anything quite like that, but it does manage to have this kind of rough sound to it that I think is a fair bit different than anything Charli has done before, whereas a project like Charli had this really glossy, shiny sound to it. This project sounds a bit different. It sounds a bit more personal, a bit more intimate with this production style to it, and I think that makes a lot of sense given the topic of this project and what inspired it, and the fact that it was pretty much composed in a pretty short amount of time just with Charli by herself. Now, of course, not every moment on this project was composed within a short amount of time. There are some tracks and moments from this thing that have been in the works for a bit longer than that, but they all managed to fit together into this thing really nicely and have a cohesive sound. So, yeah, I think the production of this thing is quite interesting. You'll have some tracks here like the opener, Pink Diamond, for example, which has this very loud, abrasive, energetic opening to it. I think it does a great job of catching your attention right at the start of this project, and it's just an awesome track as a result of that. You also have a song like Anthems later on in the track list, which also has this kind of upbeat, party-like sound to it, but it has also this kind of abrasive, dark edge to it at the same time. It's almost claustrophobic with how everything comes together in the sound of this track, and the lyrics certainly help with that too, but I'll discuss that more when I get to the lyrics of this project. Even on songs on this record that aren't super abrasive or energetic, there are still noisier elements being incorporated into the instrumentals of these tracks. For example, a song like Forever, which for the most part I wouldn't call super energetic or anything quite like that, but it still has these noisier elements worked into the production. And you do have some moments in the production of this track that do sound a bit smoother, and just the way all these elements come together on this song, it just makes for a very interesting instrumental. Of course, you also have some songs on this thing that are even less abrasive than that. Tracks like 7 Years, for example, or I Finally Understand, songs that are just a bit more simplistic when it comes to their instrumentals, but they still fit the general aesthetic and sound of this project. This whole record just has a very cohesive sound to it that I really enjoyed. The other element of this project that's fairly different than anything Charli has done before are the lyrics here on this thing, because as I mentioned before, they're inspired by the current pandemic that we're all living through and just the concept of being quarantined as well. And this is obviously something she's never covered before in her music, but the way that she tackles it here on this project I think is really interesting. She doesn't tackle it from, say, a political standpoint or a social standpoint necessarily. She does it more from a personal standpoint, and I mean, that's pretty much what the title of the album kind of implies, How I'm Feeling Now. That's exactly what you're getting here in the lyrics. It's essentially Charli talking about how she's feeling in the current time and what this quarantine, what this pandemic is causing her to feel. When it comes to how these songs tackle this general issue, some of them are a bit more specific than others. For example, the track Anthems talks about wanting to be out with other people, wanting to party with other people, wanting to just, experience social interaction with others and just be happy in that moment. Something that I'm sure a lot of people could relate to at the moment. But the way that this track is framed, it has this somewhat dark edge to it at the same time, especially with the production that I mentioned earlier. It gives this track this kind of dark, almost claustrophobic feel to it. The desire for human interaction just so strongly radiates from this track that it leads to one of the most energetic and potent moments on the entire project. You also have the song C 2.0, which I'm pretty sure stands for Click 2.0, because this song is clearly referencing the song Click off Charli's last project, a song that in its original context was essentially Charli and some of her artist friends kind of bragging, feeling good about themselves as a group, and this track here plays off that topic in a really interesting way. It essentially talks about Charli missing her friends, things of that sort, something that I'm sure a lot of people also experience right now in quarantine, just wanting to be with your friends and things like that in person. But the way that this track uses its source material, I just find to be really creative and interesting. It never feels like you need to know the original track to enjoy this track, but at the same time, to anyone who knows the original song, the way that this track takes it and turns it into something related but also completely different, I just find to be really interesting, especially when it comes to how some of the vocals from the original track are reused here and just reworked into this song. It's one of the more interesting tracks from a production standpoint in that regard too, but the lyrics here on this thing, they manage to be quite relatable to a lot of people, but at the same time they feel so specifically Charli that it's just a really genius idea, honestly. I'm really happy she was able to come up with this and put it together here on the project, as it's really the most original song on the record, even though it's a track that's based on another song. There are also tracks on this record that tackle the topic at hand in a bit more of a general fashion. For example, there's many tracks on this thing that talk about a romantic relationship with a significant other, something that at first doesn't seem all too related to the topic at hand, but really when you consider the fact that many people, Charli included, are quarantining with a significant other during this time, it makes a bit more sense. A lot of these tracks are obviously coming out of just the feelings and emotions related to being stuck with someone for quite a while and just having your relationship develop and change and grow as a result of that. And despite this single topic, you get quite a lot of mileage out of it. For example, you have tracks like Forever, which have a bit more of a positive take on things, but at the same time you'll have some more vulnerability shown in a song like Detonate, or for example on Enemy, where it seems like Charli's talking about this significant other who seems to be a friend currently, but she's somewhat afraid might become an enemy in the future, and if that were to happen, it would be quite bad because they know so much about her already. So overall, the lyrics on this record managed to be quite topical, but in a way that I really enjoyed, because they don't really seem like they're trying to be too forced or anything quite like that. They feel very personal, but at the same time quite relatable to a lot of other people as well, I feel. And I think that's probably one of the bigger selling points of this project overall, honestly, just the fact that she manages to not only get across her own thoughts during this time on this project, but the fact that they could be just universally understood and related to by so many people at the same time. I think it's a pretty big strong point about this thing, and overall the lyrics on this thing are just really good for that reason. When it comes to Charli's vocal performances on this project, they're pretty great. She packs many catchy hooks into this project, many memorable melodies as well. There's just so many infectious songs on this project as a result. Songs like Pink Diamond, Forever, Claws, I Finally Understand. Honestly, I can go on and on and on. Pretty much every track on this thing has a really memorable, catchy hook that's just been stuck in my head since I first listened to this project. This is certainly something that's been the case for all of Charli's projects, but yeah, it's still the case here and I still really enjoy it. Another thing I really enjoy about this album is the runtime of the project and how short and to the point it is. It's just a little under 40 minutes in length, which is on the shorter side of Charli projects, but I think it works to this project's advantage, as I said before, just because of how personal and straightforward and simplistic a lot of these tracks are. While the production here is quite detailed and while the lyrics are also pretty interesting too, the structures of a lot of these songs are pretty simple and to the point, which I don't think is a bad thing for the record, but I think it leads to this project benefiting from a shorter runtime as a whole, as opposed to just something a bit more drawn out, because I feel like if that was the case, this project would just end up feeling quite a bit bloated. But that's not what happens here, fortunately. This album feels just like the perfect length for what you're getting here. Plus, compared to projects like Pop 2 and Charli, which were packed full of features, there's not really any features on this thing except for the artists that come in to do the production here on this thing, because obviously Charli isn't doing it herself, but there's no featured hooks or verses on this thing at all, which is a pretty big change of pace compared to the last two Charli releases, and I think it makes sense just given the fact that this album is meant to be kind of a personal experience, like the title says. It's how she's feeling right now, not really how she and 20 other people that she knows are feeling right now. When it comes to complaints that I have with this record, I do have a few, though nothing that I think is really serious or that really gets in the way of my enjoyment of this record as a whole or anything. For example, I think the lyrics to the closer track on this thing, Visions, are maybe a bit too abstract for me to get into all that much, especially when you compare them to some of the other lyrics on this project that just feel really focused and relatable. The lyrics on the closer track just feel kind of underdeveloped. The track as a whole is still really enjoyable, but I do think the lyrics could have been maybe just a bit more focused overall. Also, I think the track Party For You is maybe just a bit longer than it needs to be. Again, not to the point that the track that you end up getting is unenjoyable or anything. In fact, I think it's still a very good song. I just feel like it's maybe just a little bit bloated, just ever so slightly. But yeah, those are really minor complaints I have with this project. And overall, I think that How I'm Feeling Now is a fantastic record overall. I like how it showcases a new side of Charli while at the same time managing to talk about some topical issues, while also at the same time managing to be personal and relatable, and also at the same time managing to have a lot of the stuff I liked in her older music, stuff like really catchy hooks and just a really fun, playful atmosphere. This is just a really great record overall. So yeah, overall, if you're a fan of Charli XCX, I would certainly recommend checking out this project. If you're a fan of pop music in general, I would also recommend checking out this project because, again, it's really great. But yeah, overall, that's just my thoughts on this record. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this album in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content. Things like album reviews, countdown lists, discussion videos, things of that sort. Again, if you like that kind of content, make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching once again, and stay golden.